Look, I have been running the ice trial for 16 solar cycles now, and let me tell you something, every single species thinks they are tough until they step onto that frozen moon. Every single one. The Craxi warriors with their 4 arms and battle scars, they tap out after 18 hours, crying about their exoskeleton joints freezing solid. The Yulmar explorers who brag about conquering 300 different biomes, 12 hours maximum, before their secondary respiratory systems shut down from the cold. And do not even get me started on the Thendorians. Those plant-based philosophers lasted 4 hours before their chlorophyll cells started crystallizing, and we had to emergency extract them before they literally shattered like glass sculptures. So you can imagine my absolute delight, my pure joy, when the human exchange cadet raised his hand during the briefing and volunteered for this cycle's trial. A human volunteered. I nearly burst into laughter right there in the briefing room, but I maintained my professional instructor demeanor, because that is what 17 years in the Galactic Academy teaches you. How to keep a straight face when cadets are about to make catastrophically stupid decisions. Let me explain something about humans, in case you have not had the displeasure of studying their biology files. These bipedal mammals come from a planet they call Earth, which they have somehow convinced themselves is a moderate temperate paradise. They are wrong. Their home world is a water-soaked sphere, where the temperature barely fluctuates. They evolved in tropical regions near the equator, and their most advanced civilizations are built in the warmest possible locations. They are so pathetically dependent on warmth that they invented something called central heating and climate control, just to survive their own mild winters. They complain when the temperature drops below what they call 70 degrees. 70 degrees, that is practically a sauna. They wear extra layers of clothing when it gets chilly, which for them means anything below their core body temperature. And the best part, the absolute best part, they have this bizarre cultural obsession with something called hot chocolate, and warm blankets, and cozy fires, because apparently they need constant external heat sources just to feel comfortable. So naturally when Jake Thompson, this lanky human with the ridiculous grin and the overly enthusiastic attitude, raised his hand and said, "I would like to attempt the ice trial, sir," I thought to myself, this is going to be the shortest trial on record. The ice trial is simple in concept, brutal in execution. We drop you on Kelvora 9, a frozen moon where the average temperature hovers around -40 degrees standard. You get basic survival gear, insulated clothing, a tarp, 50 meters of rope, a utility knife, and a standard issue emergency beacon. That is it. No heat sources, no technology, no thermal generators, no fire starting equipment, nothing that produces warmth. The rules are absolute: survive for 72 hours using only your wits, your biology, and whatever you can construct from the environment. Oh, and did I mention the wind chill can drop temperatures to -60, or that the atmospheric moisture freezes mid-air and falls like tiny daggers, or that most species start experiencing system failures within the first rotation? Jake Thompson stood there, nodding along with that infuriatingly cheerful expression, and asked exactly one question. "Sir, what is the average snow density on Kelvora 9, and how consistent are the wind patterns?" I stared at him. My 3 eyes blinked in sequence, which is what my species does when we encounter something profoundly confusing. Why would he need to know snow density? What possible relevance could wind patterns have when he would be huddling in whatever minimal shelter he could construct, desperately waiting for hypothermia to take him so he could hit that emergency beacon and end his suffering? But I answered him anyway, because regulations require instructors to provide requested environmental data. Snow density averages 0.3 grams per cubic centimeter, and wind patterns are consistently north-northwest at 20 kilometers per hour, with gusts up to 40. He actually smiled wider. "Perfect. Thank you, sir. Perfect." He said perfect. I glanced at Polmick, my Craxi co-instructor, who was standing beside me with all 4 arms crossed in what I recognized as his "this is going to be entertaining" posture. We had been running the ice trial together for 8 cycles now, and we had developed an unspoken communication system based entirely on eye contact and subtle appendage movements. His expression clearly said, "How long do you give him?" My expression replied, 6 hours tops. His mandibles twitched in amusement. "I bet he does not make it past 4. This was going to be the easiest bet I ever won. I pulled up the holographic display and began the official briefing. watching Jake's face for the moment when reality would sink in and that ridiculous smile would fade. It never came. Calvara 9, I announced, gesturing to the rotating image of the frozen moon, is located in the outer rim of the Kelter system. Surface temperature -40 degrees standard. Atmospheric composition breathable but thin. Moisture content high, which means everything freezes, including your respiratory passages, if you breathe too deeply. Jake nodded, taking notes on his datapad. Actually, taking notes like this was a recreational field trip. You will be equipped with the following. I continued, highlighting each item as it appeared in the hologram. 1 insulated bodysuit, rated for -20 degrees. 1 thermal underlayer. 1 outer shell jacket. Standard issue boots. Gloves. A tarp. 3 meters by 3 meters. 50 meters of synthetic rope. 1 utility knife. 1 emergency beacon, which you are authorized to activate at any point if you wish to forfeit the trial. And finally 1 standard ration pack containing 72 hours of nutrition bars and water pouches. I paused for effect, letting the woefully inadequate equipment list sink in. What you will not have, I said, and I admit I took some satisfaction in this part, is any device capable of generating heat. No thermal packs, no friction igniters, no chemical warmers, no energy cells, no combustion materials. The point of the ice trial is to test your species' natural adaptation to extreme cold environments using only biological and mental resources. One of the other cadets, a Yulmar named Kresh, raised his sensory stalks. Sir, what is the completion rate for this trial? Excellent question, Cadet Kresh. I replied, pulling up the statistics. In the 16 cycles I have been administering this trial, 67% of participants have failed to complete the full 72 hours. 23% have required emergency medical extraction due to hypothermia, frostbite, or systemic failure. The remaining 10% have technically completed the trial, though most required medical attention immediately upon extraction. I let that sink in before delivering my favorite part. The current record holder is a Carillion named Throcknell, whose species evolved on an ice planet with an average temperature of -30 degrees. His people have specialized metabolic processes designed specifically for extreme cold. He completed the trial with a core body temperature drop of only 2 degrees. His post-trial medical report noted severe exhaustion, minor frostbite on 3 extremities, and a recommendation that the trial duration be reduced for non-cold adapted species. I looked directly at Jake. Throcknell barely survived, and his species is biologically engineered for this exact environment. You understand what I am saying, Cadet Thompson? Yes, sir, Jake said, still smiling. It sounds challenging. Challenging. He said challenging like he was describing a mildly difficult puzzle game. Sir, Jake continued, raising his hand like we were in primary education. You mentioned the snow density earlier. Is the snow on Calvara 9 dry and powdery, or does it have moisture content that makes it packable? I blinked all 3 eyes again. Why would you possibly need to know that? Just trying to understand the environment, sir, he replied cheerfully. It is packable, I suppose, I said slowly. The moisture content is high enough that the snow compresses under pressure. But again, why does this matter when you will be focused on not freezing to death? Just curious, sir. And the wind patterns, are they consistent throughout the day-night cycle, or do they shift? Pulmek leaned toward me and whispered in our native language, is he planning to build something? With what? I whispered back. Snow? He is going to construct a shelter from frozen water particles while his fingers fall off from frostbite. Maybe humans have some adaptation we do not know about, Pulmek suggested, though his tone indicated he found this unlikely. I reviewed their biological files thoroughly, I said. They are tropical mammals with minimal cold adaptation. They do not even have fur. Their skin is exposed. They lose heat faster than almost any other species in the academy. Another cadet, a Thendorian named Lex, spoke up. Sir, has a human ever attempted the ice trial before? No, I admitted. Cadet Thompson is the first human exchange student to volunteer. Previous human cadets have wisely selected trials more suited to their biological strengths. What are human biological strengths? Kresh asked. I had to think about that one. They have unusually high endurance for a bipedal species, and their problem-solving abilities are above average. However, neither of those traits will help when your blood starts to freeze. Jake raised his hand again. Sir, just to confirm, We are allowed to manipulate the environment, correct? Like if I wanted to dig into the snow or pile it up or shape it, that is within the rules. Technically, yes, I said, confused by the question. You can do whatever you want with the environment. It will not matter. The cold will still kill you. Understood, sir. Thank you. That was when I made the bet. During the brief break before transport, I pulled Polmek aside along with 2 other instructors who were observing the trial. I will wager my entire month's credits that the human does not last 1 full rotation. A rotation on Kelvara 9 was approximately 28 hours standard time. Polmek's mandibles clicked in amusement. You think he will last that long? I give him 6 hours before he activates the beacon. 4 hours, said Instructor Valen, a Carillion who understood cold survival better than anyone. Humans have no subcutaneous insulation. Their extremities are poorly designed for heat retention, and their metabolic rate is insufficient for sustained thermogenesis. He will realize his mistake quickly. Then we have a bet, I said. 4 hours, 6 hours, or 1 rotation. Closest estimate wins the pool. We all watched Jake across the briefing room, where he was doing some kind of repetitive movement exercise, bending and straightening his legs rapidly while swinging his arms. What is he doing? Valen asked. I think humans call those jumping jacks, Polmek said. Some kind of primitive calisthenics. Before a survival trial? I shook my head. He is wasting energy. This is going to be even shorter than I thought. Jake caught us looking and waved enthusiastically. I did not wave back. The transport shuttle descended through Kelvara 9's thin atmosphere, and I watched the external temperature reading drop with satisfying speed. -10, -20, -30. By the time we reached the designated drop zone, the display read -38 degrees standard, and we had not even factored in wind chill yet. The 5 cadets who had volunteered for this cycle sat in the cargo bay, already wearing their insulated suits. Kresh looked nervous, his sensory stalks twitching. Lex had assumed a meditative posture, probably slowing his metabolic processes to conserve energy. The 2 other cadets, a Vraxi named Tenna and a Molkor named Court, were reviewing their emergency beacon activation procedures. And then there was Jake, who was stretching his legs and humming some kind of melody. Final equipment check, Polmek announced. Verify you have all issued items. Each cadet confirmed their gear. Jake patted his pack and gave a thumbs-up gesture, which I had learned was a human sign of approval or readiness. It looked ridiculous. Once you exit this shuttle, I said, you are on your own for 72 hours. The surveillance drones will monitor your vital signs and location, but will not intervene unless you activate your emergency beacon or your vitals reach critical levels. There is no shame in forfeit. This trial has broken cadets from species far more cold-adapted than yours. I looked directly at Jake when I said that last part. He just smiled wider. The shuttle doors opened, and the cold hit like a physical force. Even inside my heated observation suit, I felt the temperature drop. The wind howled across the landing zone, carrying sheets of powder snow that reduced visibility to barely 20 meters. Gomek shouted over the wind. The cadets grabbed their packs and rushed out into the frozen wasteland. The shuttle lifted off immediately, leaving them to their fates. We transferred to the orbital observation ship, where we would monitor their progress via drone feeds and biosensor data. I settled into my monitoring station and pulled up the 5 video feeds. Bresh had already deployed his tarp as a crude windbreak, and was huddling behind it. Lex was digging a shallow trench to get below the wind line. Tenna and Court were working together to create a shared shelter, all standard survival responses. And then there was Jake's feed. The human was standing in the middle of an open snowfield, arms spread wide, head tilted back, and he was laughing, actually laughing. His breath came out in massive clouds of vapor as the moisture froze instantly in the air. His core temperature is dropping rapidly, Valen observed, watching the biosensor readout. Down 0.5 degrees already. Shock response, I said confidently. His system is going into panic mode. He will activate the beacon within the hour. But Jake did not activate the beacon. Instead, he did something that made absolutely no sense whatsoever. He took off his gloves. What is he doing? Polmek leaned closer to the screen. Did his cognitive functions already fail? Jake dropped to his knees in front of a large snowdrift and started digging with his bare hands, scooping out massive handfuls of snow and piling them beside him, and he was talking to himself, out loud. in temperatures that should have made speech difficult due to frozen respiratory passages. Okay. Jake's voice came through the drone's audio pickup, slightly breathless but cheerful. Snow fort rules. I remember this from when I was 8. You want the packed stuff, not the powdery stuff. This is perfect. This is absolutely perfect packing snow. Snow fort? I repeated. What is a snow fort? Accessing human cultural database, Polmick said, working his console. A snow fort appears to be a recreational structure that human children build during seasonal cold periods for entertainment purposes. He thinks this is entertainment. Valen stared at the screen in disbelief. Jake had excavated a significant hollow into the snowdrift, and was now doing something even stranger. He was taking handfuls of snow, compressing them between his palms, and shaping them into blocks. Rectangular blocks. And he was stacking them. Oh, this brings back memories, Jake said to nobody, his breath coming in steady clouds. Dad would kill me if he knew I was doing this without gloves, but you need bare hands for the first layer to pack it properly. Once I get the base done, gloves go back on. He was building something, an actual structure, from snow. Sir, one of the junior technicians said, his hand temperature is dropping to dangerous levels. Good, I said. Reality is setting in. He will stop this nonsense soon. But Jake did not stop. He kept shaping blocks, stacking them in a circular pattern, each layer slightly overlapping the previous one. The structure began to curve inward, forming a dome. Is he building a dwelling? Polmick asked. From frozen water? I shook my head. That will provide zero insulation. Zero. If anything, it will make him colder because he is surrounding himself with a substance that is literally defined by its lack of heat. Jake had apparently finished the first layer because he stopped, shook out his hands vigorously, and put his gloves back on. Then he started doing that jumping exercise again, the one he had been doing before the drop. Jumping jacks. His voice came through the audio, counting out loud. 21, 22, 23. Come on, get that blood flowing. 24, 25. He is wasting energy, Valen said. Cardiovascular exercise in extreme cold increases heat loss through respiration and perspiration. Unless, Polmick said slowly, he is trying to generate heat through muscle activity. I laughed. Generate enough heat to survive -40 degrees through jumping. His species would need a metabolic rate comparable to a Kryn furnace beetle. It is impossible. Jake finished his jumping jacks, did some kind of twisting motion with his torso, then returned to his construction project. The dome was taking shape now, maybe 1.5 meters tall, with walls that were surprisingly thick. He had created an entrance tunnel at the base, just large enough to crawl through, and he was still talking to himself. The thing about igloos, Jake explained to the empty frozen landscape, is that everyone thinks they should be cold because they are made of ice and snow, but that is completely backwards. Snow is actually an amazing insulator because of all the air pockets trapped between the ice crystals. Air is a terrible conductor of heat, which means it is a great insulator. You get enough snow packed together and you have basically created a foam insulation barrier. Plus, body heat in an enclosed space, even a small amount, gets trapped and raises the internal temperature significantly. I stared at the screen. Did he just, I said slowly, explain thermodynamic principles while building a recreational structure in -40-degree weather? His core temperature has stabilized, the technician reported. Still dropping but slower now. Jake patted the dome structure affectionately, crawled through the entrance tunnel, and disappeared inside. The external camera lost visual, but the biosensor data continued feeding information. Internal temperature of his structure, Polmick read from his screen, is reading -32 degrees. That is still lethally cold, I pointed out. Yes, but it is 8 degrees warmer than the external temperature, Fallon said quietly, without any heat source, just compressed snow and trapped air. We watched the biosensor read out. Jake's core temperature had stopped dropping. It was not rising, but it was not dropping either. He has been outside for 43 minutes, Polmick noted. My bet was 6 hours. Perhaps I was overly optimistic. I checked the other feeds. Kresh was shivering violently behind his tarp. Lex's temperature was dropping steadily despite his metabolic slowdown. Tenna and Court's shared shelter was helping, but both were showing signs of cold stress. And Jake was inside a dome made of snow, and his vital signs were steady. This makes no sense, I muttered. Jake's voice came through the audio again, muffled but audible. Now we wait for body heat to do its thing. Should warm up to maybe -10, -5. If I am lucky, not exactly tropical but totally survivable. Man, I wish I had brought cards or something. This is going to be boring. Boring, he said, boring. I was beginning to suspect I had made a terrible bet. 6 hours into the trial, I had to run the equipment diagnostics for the third time, because the readings I was getting from Jake's shelter could not possibly be correct. External temperature on Kelvara 9 -42 degrees standard factoring in wind chill. Internal temperature of Jake's snow dome -5 degrees. That was a 37-degree differential, without any heat source, from a structure made entirely of frozen water. Run the scan again, I told the technician. There has to be equipment malfunction. Sir, I have run it 4 times already, she replied, her tone suggesting she thought I was losing my grip on reality. The thermal imaging is consistent. The internal temperature of the human shelter is significantly higher than the external environment. Then he smuggled in a heat source, I said firmly. Scan for energy signatures, chemical reactions, electrical fields, anything that could generate thermal output. Polnick was already working his console, running full spectrum analysis now, checking for concealed technology, unauthorized equipment, chemical hand warmers, friction devices, compressed gas heaters, everything in the database. We waited. The scan took 3 minutes. Results are negative, Polnick announced. No artificial heat sources detected, no technology beyond his issued emergency beacon, no chemical signatures consistent with combustion or exothermic reactions. I leaned back in my chair and rubbed my face with 2 of my hands while the third one drummed on the console. Then where is the heat coming from? As if to answer my question, Jake emerged from his shelter. The drone camera tracked him as he stood up in the blowing snow, stretched his arms above his head, and began doing those jumping exercises again. But this time he added variations. He dropped to the ground and started pushing himself up and down with his arms, his body rigid like a plank of wood. Up, down, 20 repetitions. What is that exercise called? Velen asked. Push-ups. Polnick read from the human database. A basic strength training exercise that engages multiple muscle groups simultaneously. Jake finished his push-ups, hopped back to his feet and started running in a circle around his snow dome. Not jogging, running. At full speed, in -42-degree weather. And he was singing. Frosty the Snowman was a jolly happy soul. Jake's voice came through the audio, completely off-key and breathless, but somehow still cheerful, with a corncob pipe and a button nose, and 2 eyes made out of coal. What is a snowman? I asked. Another human recreational cold weather activity, Polnick said, pulling up an image. They build humanoid figures from stacked snow spheres and decorate them with various objects. They build representations of themselves from frozen water, I said slowly, for fun. Apparently, Jake completed 5 laps around his shelter, stopped, did a series of rapid knee-raising movements while punching the air, then dropped back down for more push-ups. Steam was rising from his body in thick clouds. His face was flushed, which according to the biosensor data indicated increased blood flow to his skin surface. He is deliberately increasing his metabolic rate, Velen said, watching the data scroll across his screen. Intense muscle activation generates heat as a byproduct. He is using his own body as a furnace. That is not sustainable. I protested. He will exhaust his energy reserves within hours. But Jake did not look exhausted. He looked energized. He finished another set of exercises, rubbed his hands together rapidly, the friction creating audible sounds picked up by the drone microphone, then stomped his feet hard against the packed snow several times before crawling back into his shelter. Did you see that? Polnick pointed at the replay. The hand rubbing, the foot stomping. He is generating heat through friction and kinetic energy. No species generates significant heat that way, I said. It is thermodynamically inefficient, except, apparently, humans. I pulled up Jake's biographical file and started reading through the sections I had previously skipped. Planet of origin, Earth. Climate zones, highly variable, ranging from -50 degrees to +50 degrees with humans successfully inhabiting nearly every climate zone. Evolutionary adaptations, persistence hunting, endurance running, advanced thermoregulation through perspiration, high metabolic rate compared to body mass. There was a note at the bottom of the file that I had ignored during my initial review. Humans are one of the few species capable of voluntary thermoregulation through behavioral and physical activity modifications. Their ability to function across extreme temperature ranges is unusual for a primarily tropical evolved species. Why did no one mention this earlier? I demanded, highlighting the note. Because it is listed under minor biological curiosities, Pulmek said. Nobody thought it was relevant. Voluntary thermoregulation through activity is not the same as cold weather adaptation. Most species can generate some heat through movement. But humans seem to have weaponized the concept. On screen, Jake was doing something else bizarre inside his shelter. The thermal imaging showed him shifting positions constantly. Sitting, standing, lying down, sitting again. Never still. His hands moved in constant patterns, rubbing together, tucking under his arms, flexing and unflexing. He is preventing heat loss through continuous micro-movements. Vulin observed. Every muscle contraction generates thermal energy. He is not just surviving the cold, he is actively fighting it with his biology. The other cadets were not faring as well. Kresh had activated his emergency beacon after 7 hours. His species' exoskeleton conducting heat away from his core too efficiently. Lex was still holding on, but his vital signs were concerning. Tenor and Cord had separated, each deciding their shared shelter was causing more problems than it solved. And Jake was doing exercises inside a snow dome, while humming songs about snowmen. Internal shelter temperature. Now reading -3 degrees, the technician reported. How? I practically shouted. How is it getting warmer? His body is producing approximately 120 watts of thermal energy at rest, Valen said, reading from the biosensor analysis. During exercise that increases to nearly 400 watts. In an enclosed space with minimal heat loss, that energy accumulates. He is literally heating his shelter with nothing but his metabolism. Pulmek turned to look at me, all 4 eyes wide. Do you think humans have internal combustion engines? They are biological organisms. I snapped. They do not have engines. They have muscles and organs and standard cellular respiration like every other carbon-based life form. Standard cellular respiration does not produce enough heat to warm a shelter in -40-degree weather. Apparently human cellular respiration is not standard. Jake emerged again for another exercise session. This time he was doing some kind of squatting motion, dropping low and standing up repeatedly while holding his arms straight out in front of him. He counted out loud with each repetition. 46, 47, 48, come on Thompson, get to 50, 49, 50. Yes. He celebrated by doing a little jumping motion with his fist raised in the air, then immediately started jogging in place while rotating his arms in large circles. Why does he keep coming outside? I wondered aloud. Look at the carbon dioxide levels inside his shelter. Pulmek pointed to another readout. They are elevated but not dangerous. I think he is ventilating himself, getting fresh air and preventing gas buildup. That is actually intelligent, Valen admitted grudgingly. Jake did one more lap around his dome at a full sprint, slipped slightly on an icy patch, recovered with surprising agility, laughed at himself, then ducked back inside his shelter. Core temperature, the technician called out. 36.7 degrees. That is only 0.2 degrees below his baseline. I stared at the number. After 8 hours in -40-degree weather, living in a shelter made of snow with no heat source except his own body, the human had lost less than a single degree of core temperature. I want a full medical analysis, I said quietly. I want to know exactly what is happening in his body that makes this possible, because this should not be possible. His caloric intake is also noteworthy. Pulmek added, pulling up the supply usage data. He has consumed nearly half of his 72-hour ration supply in the first 8 hours. He is eating his way through the trial, I said. No, Valen corrected. He is fueling his internal furnace. Food equals energy equals heat. He is not surviving the cold, he is burning his way through it. On the monitor, Jake's voice drifted through the audio pickup singing another off-key song about winter and snow and something called Jingle Bells. I had bet an entire month's credits that he would not last one rotation. We were 12 hours away from one full rotation, and Jake Thompson was singing holiday songs in a snow fort while his body defied the laws of thermodynamics. I was beginning to realize that humans were either the toughest species in the galaxy, or the most absurdly stubborn, possibly both. Day 2 of the trial began with 2 emergency extractions within 3 hours of each other. Lex activated his beacon at the 29-hour mark. The medical team reported severe frostbite on his lower extremities and early-stage hypothermia. His metabolic slowdown technique, which should have helped him conserve energy, had instead reduced his body's ability to generate heat. He was unconscious by the time the rescue shuttle reached him. Tenna lasted until hour 34 before her beacon triggered automatically when her core temperature dropped below critical levels. The medical report was grim: tissue damage to 3 of her 6 limbs, potential neural damage from prolonged cold exposure, and respiratory complications from breathing the frigid air. Court's shelter collapsed during a wind gust at hour 38. He managed to activate his beacon manually, but the exposure during the collapse had caused rapid onset hypothermia. He was coherent during extraction but barely. That left exactly 1 cadet still in the trial, the human, who was at that exact moment building a second structure next to his original snow dome. "What is he doing now?" I asked, though by this point the question had become rhetorical. Whatever Jake was doing, it would somehow be both ridiculous and effective. "He appears to be constructing a windbreak wall," Polmick said, zooming in the drone camera. Approximately 2 meters long, 1 meter high, positioned on the north-northwest side of his shelter to block the prevailing wind. Jake worked steadily, packing snow into blocks with his gloved hands, stacking them with surprising precision. He had rolled up his sleeves despite the -41-degree temperature, and steam rose from his exposed forearms. "His skin is exposed to direct cold," Valon said, alarmed. "He should be experiencing frostbite within minutes." "Blood flow to his extremities is elevated," the technician reported. "His body is actively pumping warm blood to his skin surface. It is like his circulatory system is working in reverse of what it should during cold exposure." I had filled 3 data tablets with notes at this point. The human biology I was witnessing defied everything I had learned in my xenobiology courses. Their thermoregulation was not just effective, it was aggressive. Humans did not adapt to the cold. They attacked it. Jake finished his windbreak, tested its stability by pushing against it with his shoulder, nodded in satisfaction, then crawled back into his shelter. A few minutes later he crawled back out and used his knife to carve a small hole near the top of his dome. "Oh right," his voice came through the audio. "Ventilation. Almost forgot. Carbon dioxide buildup is no joke. Last thing I need is to survive the cold and then pass out from bad air. Dad taught me that one on our winter camping trip in Colorado. Always ventilate your shelter," he said. "Always." "He went winter camping," I said flatly. "Voluntarily. For recreation. Apparently humans have an entire recreational industry based around deliberately exposing themselves to cold weather," Polmek said, scrolling through Earth's cultural database. "Skiing, snowboarding, ice fishing, winter hiking, something called polar bear plunges where they jump into frozen water for fun." "For fun," I repeated. "They even have competitions to see who can stay in ice water the longest." I put my face in my hands. All 3 of them. Jake had disappeared back into his shelter, and now the audio pickup was catching him talking to himself again. This seemed to be a constant habit. He narrated his own actions like he was teaching an invisible class. "Okay, so the key to layering is understanding how insulation works," Jake explained to nobody. "You want to trap air between layers because air is your friend. Base layer wicks moisture away from skin. Middle layer provides insulation. Outer layer blocks wind and precipitation. But here's the trick. You do not want to overheat because sweat is your enemy in cold weather. Wet equals cold equals death, so you adjust layers based on activity level." As he spoke, the thermal imaging showed him removing his outer jacket, keeping his mid-layer and base layer, then doing another exercise routine inside the shelter. After 20 minutes of activity, he put the outer layer back on and settled into a resting position. "He is managing his perspiration levels," Valon said, impressed despite himself, preventing moisture buildup that would compromise his insulation. "How does he know to do this?" I demanded. "Is this instinct? Is this taught? How does a species that evolved in tropical climates develop this level of cold weather expertise?" "I found something in the cultural database," Polmek said quietly. "Humans have inhabited their planet's polar regions for over 15,000 years. They built civilizations in places with winter temperatures regularly below -30 degrees. They did not just survive these environments. They thrived in them. hunting, fishing, building permanent settlements. But they evolved in warm climates, I protested. Yes. And then they spread to every other climate on their planet through nothing but behavioral adaptation and tool use. They did not wait for evolution to catch up. They just decided they wanted to live everywhere. So they figured out how. On screen, Jake emerged from his shelter again, this time carrying his rope and a piece of his tarp that he had apparently cut into strips. He gathered some dead branches from a frozen shrub nearby, sat down in his shelter's entrance, and began doing something with his hands. Is he attempting to create fire? Valen leaned forward. Jake had wrapped the rope around a stick positioned against a flat piece of wood. He pulled the rope back and forth rapidly, causing the stick to spin at high speed. Smoke began to rise from the friction point. He is creating fire through friction alone, I said. With no tools except rope and wood, within 5 minutes, Jake had coaxed a small ember into existence. He fed it carefully with the tarp strips, which caught and burned briefly. A tiny flame flickered in his hands. Shelter temperature is spiking, the technician reported. He is going to warm his environment. But Jake did not use the fire for warmth. Instead, he held it up toward the drone camera, smiled widely and said, "See? Totally could start a fire if I needed to. But the rules said no heat sources, so I am going to follow the rules." And then he deliberately extinguished the flame, crushed the embers into the snow, and tossed the burnt materials outside his shelter. He created fire just to prove he could, Polnick said slowly, and then destroyed it to follow the spirit of the trial regulations. He is showing off, I said. He is demonstrating that the only thing keeping him from being completely comfortable is his voluntary compliance with our arbitrary rules, Valen corrected. Jake did another circuit of jumping jacks and push-ups, singing a song about someone named Santa Claus, who apparently lived in a polar region and enjoyed cold weather, then returned to his shelter. The internal temperature reading showed -4 degrees, warmer than some species' climate-controlled habitats. Current trial time, I said quietly. 41 hours, 18 minutes, the technician replied. He has exceeded the average completion rate, Valen noted. If he maintains his current status for another 31 hours, he will have completed the full trial. Do you think he will? Polnick asked. I watched Jake's vital signs on the monitor. Heart rate, steady. Core temperature, only 0.3 degrees below baseline. Respiration normal. Caloric reserves still adequate, though he had eaten 3/4 of his rations. The biosensor showed no signs of distress, no indication of system failure, no evidence that his body was struggling with the environment at all. I think, I said slowly, that Jake Thompson is going to complete this trial, set a new record for non-cold adapted species, and make me look like a complete fool for betting against him. You did call him a tropical weakling, Polnick reminded me. I know what I said. On screen, Jake was doing something else now. He was pulling items from his pack and arranging them in a specific pattern, rope coiled neatly, knife placed within easy reach, empty ration wrappers folded and stacked, remaining water pouches organized by accessibility. He is setting up a living space, I said. Not just a survival shelter. An actual organized living space. Like he is planning to stay there comfortably. Jake laid back in his shelter, hands behind his head, and started talking to the drone again. You know what the worst part about this trial is? He asked, conversationally. The boredom. I mean, yeah, it is cold. But once you have your shelter built and your routine established, there is not much to do except wait. I should have brought a book or something. Maybe next time I will ask if recreational materials are allowed. Do you guys have cards? I could teach you poker, or we could play 20 questions. Do Craxy play games? He thought the worst part was boredom. Not the lethal cold. Not the isolation. Not the physical demands of maintaining body temperature in an environment that had already hospitalized 3 cadets. Boredom. I am updating my assessment of human threat classification, Valen said. This level of environmental adaptation combined with casual disregard for conditions that incapacitate other species suggests humans may be significantly more dangerous than their current diplomatic status indicates. I had to agree. Any species that treats a survival trial as a minor inconvenience is a species you do not want to underestimate. I had underestimated Jake Thompson. I would not make that mistake again. I could not sleep. At hour 53 of the trial, I should have been in my rest cycle, letting the night shift monitors handle observation duties. Instead, I was in the research library, accessing every piece of human biological data I could find, trying to understand what I was witnessing. The initial classification files were useless. Surface-level observations, basic anatomy, the kind of information you would put in a first-contact diplomatic brief. I needed deeper data, so I accessed the Galactic Biology Institute's Comprehensive Species Analysis Archive, the one that required Level 4 clearance and was typically reserved for military threat assessment. What I found made me question my entire understanding of biological adaptation. Humans evolved on Earth approximately 200,000 years ago as persistence hunters. I had to read that phrase 3 times before I understood what it meant. They did not evolve to be fast like Kraxi warriors. They did not evolve to be strong like Moke or laborers. They evolved to be relentless. Their hunting strategy was simple and absolutely terrifying. Find an animal, chase it until it collapsed from exhaustion, then kill it while it was too tired to fight back. They would pursue prey for hours, sometimes days, across scorching deserts where temperatures exceeded 45 degrees. Their prey would sprint away, hide, rest, sprint again. Humans would just keep coming, walking, jogging, always moving, never stopping. The biological adaptations that made this possible were extensive. First, thermoregulation through perspiration. Humans could sweat releasing water through millions of pores across their skin surface, which evaporated and cooled their bodies. This allowed them to function in extreme heat without overheating. No other species in the galaxy had evolved such an efficient cooling system. Most species panted or reduced activity. Humans just kept moving and sweated more. Second, efficient bipedal locomotion. Walking upright on 2 legs used minimal energy compared to quadrupedal movement. Humans could cover enormous distances without exhausting their energy reserves. Their leg muscles were specifically adapted for sustained repetitive motion. Third, advanced cardiovascular systems. Human hearts could maintain elevated blood flow for hours. Their circulatory systems could dynamically adjust, sending blood to muscles during activity, to skin for cooling, to core organs for survival. They could voluntarily control blood vessel dilation and constriction in ways most species managed only through automatic responses. But it was the metabolic data that made me stop reading and just stare at the screen. Human basal metabolic rate, the energy their bodies consumed just to exist, was absurdly high. At rest, an average human generated approximately 100 watts of thermal energy. During moderate activity, that tripled. During intense exercise, it could exceed 400 watts. 400 watts. That was more thermal output than some species' portable heating units. And it was all generated through muscular activity and cellular respiration. Human muscle tissue was inefficient by design. Only about 25% of the chemical energy from food converted to mechanical work. The other 75% became heat. Waste heat. Heat that most species would consider a design flaw. For humans, it was a survival feature. I pulled up the video feed of Jake's shelter. He was doing another exercise routine, and now I understood why. Every jumping jack, every push-up, every lap around his dome was not panic or boredom management. It was temperature regulation. He was deliberately activating his muscles to generate heat, then using that heat to warm his body and his shelter. He was running an internal combustion system fueled by nutrition bars and powered by his own biology. "You look like you have seen a ghost," Polmek said, entering the library. "Could not sleep either. Did you know that humans can increase their metabolic rate voluntarily by up to 4 times their baseline?" I asked him. "I did not. Did you know they evolved in a climate zone where temperatures varied by over 60 degrees between seasons, and they adapted by simply adjusting their behavior and activity levels rather than developing specialized biology? That seems improbable. It is documented fact." I turned the screen toward him. "Look at this. Humans inhabited a region called Siberia, where winter temperatures reached -50 degrees. They had no fur, no blubber, no specialized cold weather adaptations, just fire, clothing, and their ability to generate heat through movement." Polmek read the data silently, his mandibles clicking in what I recognized as confusion. "This says humans crossed a frozen land bridge during an ice age and populated an entire continent while other species were hibernating or migrating to warmer regions. They did not migrate south," I said. "They migrated into the cold, on purpose. Because there was food there and fewer predators. That is insane. That is humanity. I pulled up another file, this one detailing human shivering response. When humans got cold, their muscles contracted rapidly and involuntarily, generating heat through friction and metabolic activity. It was an automatic furnace that activated when external temperatures dropped. Combined with their voluntary exercise thermogenesis, humans had both passive and active heating systems built into their biology. Jake is not surviving the trial, I said quietly. He is barely noticing it. Every time he exercises, he is generating enough heat to warm his shelter by several degrees. Every time he eats, he is fueling his metabolic furnace. Every time he moves, he is fighting the cold with his biology. And the worst part is, this is not even close to his species' limits. What do you mean? Polmek asked. I pulled up the extreme environment data. Humans have reached the summit of their planet's highest mountain, where temperatures reach -40 and oxygen levels are 30% of normal. They have explored both polar regions, establishing permanent research stations in environments that would kill most species within hours. They have survival records in deserts exceeding 50 degrees and in tundra below -60. Their temperature tolerance range is over 110 degrees. That is impossible, Polmek said flatly. It is documented across hundreds of years of their history. They do not have the biology for extreme adaptation. They have the biology for extreme adaptability. There is a difference. On screen, Jake emerged from his shelter and began another exercise circuit. This time he added variety, running backwards, doing side-to-side movements, performing some kind of twisting motion while jumping. His breath came out in massive clouds of frozen vapor, but his movements were smooth and controlled. He could probably continue this indefinitely, I said. As long as he has food to fuel his metabolism and water to prevent dehydration, his body will keep generating heat. The trial is not testing his limits. It is testing our understanding of what limits should be. Polmek sat down beside me, watching the feed. When Thropnol completed the trial, he required 6 days of medical recovery. His frost-adapted biology was pushed to its absolute maximum. He called it the hardest thing he had ever done. Jake called it boring. Yes, we sat in silence for a moment, watching the human do exercises in lethal cold, while humming another song about winter. I need to revise the trial parameters, I said finally. If humans can complete this with minimal difficulty, then it is not testing them appropriately. It is just wasting their time. What would test a human? Polmek asked. I thought about that. A species that could adapt to any environment through behavior modification alone. A species that generated heat through voluntary activity. A species that evolved to never stop moving, never give up, never surrender to environmental conditions. I have no idea, I admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe the test for humans is not survival. Maybe it is convincing them that something is actually difficult. Jake finished his exercises and crawled back into his shelter. His core temperature reading showed 36.6 degrees, only 0.1 degree below his baseline after 53 hours in -40-degree weather. How much longer until trial completion? I asked. 19 hours, 12 minutes. He is going to set a record, I said. Not just complete the trial, but complete it with better vital signs than Thropnol, the species that was biologically designed for exactly this environment. Are you going to tell him that? Polmek asked. Absolutely not, I said. His ego is insufferable enough already. Did you hear him asking about bringing recreational materials next time? Next time. Like he is planning to do this again for fun. Humans are terrifying, Polmek said simply. Yes, I agreed. Yes, they are. And the most terrifying part was that Jake Thompson probably represented an average human, not exceptional, not specially trained for cold weather survival. Just an average human cadet doing what humans apparently did naturally, adapting, surviving, and treating lethal environments like minor inconveniences. I updated my assessment files with a new classification note. Humans environmental threat level minimal. Human environmental tolerance threat level extreme. Do not underestimate, do not challenge to survival competitions. Do not bet against. That last one was personal advice. For myself. Because I had definitely lost that bet. Hour 68 of the trial is when Jake apparently decided that simply surviving was not entertaining enough. Okay, so I have been thinking. His voice came through the drone audio, and I have about 4 hours left, and I am pretty bored, so I am going to build another igloo. A bigger one. Just to see if I can. He is going to what? I asked the empty observation room. The night shift had ended. Day shift had not arrived yet, and I had been monitoring Jake continuously for the past 12 hours because I genuinely could not look away from this absurdity. Jake emerged from his shelter, stretched elaborately, did 50 jumping jacks while counting out loud, then surveyed the area around his camp like a contractor evaluating a construction site. "Yeah, okay, plenty of good packing snow over there," he said, pointing to a fresh drift. "Let us do this." Igloo 2.0. The sequel. This time it is personal. For the next 2 hours, I watched a human build a second snow shelter, approximately 50% larger than his first one, complete with an elevated sleeping platform, a separate entrance tunnel, and what he described as aesthetic improvements to the dome curvature for better wind deflection. He was applying engineering principles to recreational snow architecture during a survival trial. When he finished, he stepped back, hands on his hips, and nodded in satisfaction. "Nice. Definitely better than the first one. Structural integrity is solid. Airflow should be good, and look at that curve. That is a quality dome right there." Then he started building something else. "What is he doing now?" Polmek asked, arriving for his shift and immediately gravitating toward the monitor showing Jake's feed. "I think he is making a statue," I said. Jake had piled snow into a rough column about 2 meters tall and was now shaping it with his gloved hands, carving features into the surface. He stepped back periodically to evaluate his work, tilted his head, then added more details. "There we go," Jake said finally, gesturing to his creation. "Headmaster Volotara, captured in snow, immortalized forever, or at least until it melts." The snow sculpture looked absolutely nothing like Headmaster Volotara. It had the right number of head ridges approximately, but the proportions were completely wrong, and the facial features were barely recognizable. "That is terrible," Polmek said. "That is offensive." I agreed. Jake seemed very proud of it. Then he did something that nearly made me fall out of my chair. He walked directly up to the surveillance drone, waved at it and said, "Hey, monitoring team. I know you are watching. Want a tour of my shelter? I have been working on it for 3 days. Might as well show it off." "Is he talking to us?" Polmek asked. "He is talking to us," I confirmed. Jake gestured for the drone to follow him, crawled into his original shelter, and began narrating like he was hosting an educational program. "So as you can see, the entrance tunnel is below the main living space, which creates a cold sink. Cold air is denser than warm air, so it settles in the tunnel while the warmer air stays in the dome. Basic thermodynamics." He pointed to various features: the ventilation hole he had carved, the packed snow walls that were now slightly glazed from his body heat melting and refreezing the inner surface, creating an ice layer that improved insulation, the organized storage area for his supplies. "And over here we have the sleeping area, where I have been using my pack as a pillow and my tarp as ground insulation to prevent heat loss through conduction. The snow platform keeps me elevated, which also helps with the cold air sink principle I mentioned earlier." He crawled back out and stood up, brushing snow off his suit. "Questions, comments, concerns about my architectural choices?" I muted the audio feed. "He is giving us a lecture. During a survival trial. He is teaching us about snow shelter construction. His core temperature is 36.7 degrees, the technician reported. He has actually gained 0.1 degrees since yesterday. How is that possible? According to the biosensor data, his caloric intake has been substantially higher than projected. He has consumed all of his rations, plus he appears to have brought supplementary high-calorie nutrition that was not in his declared supplies. I checked the supply manifest. Standard ration pack, 72-hour supply. But Jake's metabolic fuel consumption suggested he had eaten nearly double that amount. "Pull up his pre-trial gear inspection footage," I ordered. The footage showed Jake loading his pack. Standard rations went in first. Then casually he added what looked like at least 10 additional nutrition bars from his personal supplies. "He smuggled in extra food," Polmek said. "Not smuggled. We never prohibited personal supplies, only heat sources and technology. He followed the rules and exploited a loophole we did not think to close because we never imagined someone would need double rations. He is fueling his internal furnace," Polmek said. "More food equals more metabolic energy equals more heat generation. He has been eating constantly to maintain his temperature." Hour 72 arrived. Extraction time. The shuttle descended and I suited up in my thermal gear, rated for brief exposure to Kelvara 9's environment. Polmek did the same. The extraction team was fully equipped with heated suits, emergency medical equipment and thermal blankets for the cadets we would be retrieving. We landed at Jake's location. He was doing yoga, not huddling for warmth, not desperately waiting for rescue, not showing any signs of distress. He was in some kind of contorted position with one leg bent and his arms stretched skyward, balanced perfectly on the packed snow, breathing slowly and deliberately. "Warrior pose," he explained cheerfully when he saw us. "Great for core stability and mental focus. Also generates a decent amount of heat through isometric muscle engagement." I stared at him. My 3 eyes blinked in sequence, independently, which is what my species does when we have completely given up on understanding reality. "Cadet Thompson," I said formally, "the trial period has concluded. You have successfully completed the ice trial. Congratulations." "Thanks, sir." Jake stood up normally. No stiffness, no obvious cold-related impairment. "That was actually pretty fun. Good challenge. I appreciate the opportunity." "Pretty fun," he said, "pretty fun." Behind me, the medical team stood ready with thermal blankets and heat packs. "Do you require medical attention?" I asked, following protocol. "Nah, I am good," Jake said, stretching his arms above his head. "Little hungry, but that is about it. Oh, and I need to use the bathroom, but I assume the shuttle has facilities. You are not experiencing hypothermia, frostbite, or cold-related complications?" "Nope, stayed pretty warm, honestly. The Igloo worked great. Did you see my second one? I think the architecture on that one was really solid." Polmek walked over to Jake's shelters, examining them with obvious professional interest. "These are well constructed," he admitted. "The structural integrity is impressive for something built from compressed snow." "Thanks. Learned it as a kid. Snow forts were a big deal where I grew up." The medical scanner confirmed what I already knew. Jake Thompson was in perfect health, core temperature normal. No tissue damage. No signs of cold stress. He had completed the ice trial, the same trial that had hospitalized 3 other cadets and pushed a cold-adapted species to their absolute limits, and he was fine. Better than fine. He had gained 0.5 kilogram somehow. "Permission to take some pictures of my igloos before we leave?" Jake asked. "For my personal records." I just nodded, too tired to argue. Jake spent 5 minutes taking images with his personal data device, posing next to his snow sculpture, and explaining to the medical team about various snow fort building techniques from his childhood. As we lifted off from Kelvara 9, I looked down at Jake's camp. 2 igloos, 1 terrible statue, and a massive circular track in the snow where he had been running laps. It looked less like a survival site and more like a winter resort. "Sir," Polmek said quietly, "I believe you owe me credits." "I know," I said. "A full month's worth." "I know. You bet against a human. I will never make that mistake again." The Academy Medical Wing was busy for the next 2 days. Lex remained in intensive care with severe frostbite requiring tissue regeneration. Tana needed neural pathway reconstruction from cold-induced damage. Cord was stable but required respiratory therapy and metabolic rebalancing. All 3 would recover, but their medical files now contained permanent notes about cold weather vulnerabilities and recommendations against future extreme environment trials. Jake Thompson went to the cafeteria and ordered 3 meals. "He is eating again," Polmek observed as we watched Jake pile his tray with protein portions, carbohydrate blocks, and what humans called dessert. "Does his digestive system ever stop?" "Apparently not," I said, walking over to Jake's table with my credit chip in hand and my pride in tatters. "Cadet Thompson." "Oh, hey, sir." Jake looked up, somehow still cheerful despite having just spent 3 days in sub-zero temperatures. "What's up?" "I owe you dinner," I said stiffly. "As per our wager. I bet you would not last 1 rotation. You lasted all 72 hours. You won." Jake's face lit up. "Oh right. The bet. Honestly, I kind of forgot about that." "Cool. Want to join me? I hate eating alone." That was how I ended up sitting across from a human in the Academy cafeteria, watching him consume enough food to sustain my species for 3 days, while he cheerfully recounted his experience like it had been a pleasant holiday. "So the trick with igloos," Jake explained between bites, "is that you really need to pack the snow properly. My dad taught me that when I was like 7 or 8, We used to go winter camping up in Minnesota every year. Sometimes Alaska, if we wanted a real adventure. I stopped eating. You went camping in colder environments than Kelvara 9, for fun. Oh yeah. Minnesota gets way colder. I have been out in -50, -60 with wind chill. Alaska can get even worse in the interior regions. But that is what makes it fun, you know. The challenge. Your family voluntarily exposed you to lethal temperatures as a child. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds bad. Jake laughed. But we had gear and skills, and my dad was an experienced outdoorsman. He taught me and my brothers all the survival basics. Fire starting, shelter building, calorie management, layering techniques. Good memories, actually. Your planet has regions that reach -50 degrees, I said slowly. And humans build recreational activities around visiting them. Sure. Skiing, snowboarding, ice fishing, winter hiking. Some people even live there year-round. My grandmother lived in northern Minnesota her whole life. Toughest woman I ever met. Jake smiled fondly at the memory. She refused to turn her heat above 60 degrees even in the middle of winter. Said it made people soft. Her house was colder than that trial, honestly. I used to wear 3 layers just to visit her at Christmas. I put down my eating utensil. Let me understand this correctly. Your grandmother's house, her voluntary living environment, was colder than a trial specifically designed to test cold weather survival capabilities. Yep, Grandma was hardcore. She would go outside in -20 weather with just a light jacket to get firewood. Meanwhile, I am bundled up like I am about to climb a mountain. He shook his head with admiration. She lived to be 97, never sick, never complained. Just went about her business regardless of temperature. Your species colonized the frozen regions of your planet, I said, more to myself than to Jake. Not because you had to, but because you could. I mean, there are resources there. Fish, minerals, space for settlements. Plus, some people just like the cold. It is quiet, peaceful, less crowded than the warmer zones. Jake finished his first plate and started on the second. Why? Where do most species prefer to settle? Temperature-controlled environments, I said. Climate-regulated cities, moderate zones. Places where the weather does not actively try to kill you. Huh. That makes sense, I guess. But you miss out on a lot of good winter activities that way. Ice skating, snowball fights, building snowmen. Those are some of the best parts of cold weather. He was listing recreational activities that required freezing temperatures. For fun. Because humans thought cold weather was enjoyable. I excused myself from the table, went directly to my office, and accessed the Academy's species classification database. I found the human entry and opened the editing interface. Current classification. Humans. Carbon-based bipedal mammals. Moderate threat level. Primary habitat. Temperate zones. Notable characteristics: high cognitive function. Social species. Moderate physical capabilities. I deleted everything after the species name and began typing. Humans. Classification. Thermal anomaly. Habitat. Anywhere they decide they want to live. Environmental conditions irrelevant. Temperature tolerance range. Extreme. Survival capabilities. Assume competence in all environments until proven otherwise. Cold weather adaptation. Excessive and apparently recreational. Weakness. Unknown, possibly non-existent. Threat level. Reconsidering previous assessments. Recommend caution when challenging humans to environmental trials. Recommend never betting against humans. Additional notes. They build recreational structures from frozen water and consider sub-zero temperatures entertaining. Their elders voluntarily live in conditions that would kill most species. They teach survival skills to their children as bonding activities. They eat constantly to fuel biological furnaces we barely understand. Conclusion. Humanity's defining characteristic is not strength or speed or intelligence, but rather an absolutely unreasonable refusal to acknowledge environmental limitations. I saved the file and leaned back in my chair. Polmek entered my office, saw what I was doing, and read the screen over my shoulder. That is going to raise questions from the classification committee, he said. Let them ask, I replied. I have 72 hours of documented evidence. Jake Thompson completed a trial designed for cold-adapted species while treating it like a mildly interesting camping trip. He built extra structures for entertainment. He gained weight. He did yoga. He also asked if he could attempt the trial again next cycle. Polmek added, said he wanted to try different shelter designs. Of course he did. What are you going to tell the committee when they review the trial results? I thought about that. About Jake's igloos and his terrible snow sculpture and his cheerful narration and his grandmother's unheated house and his childhood camping trips in temperatures that would hospitalize most species. I am going to tell them the truth, I said finally. That we designed a trial to test the limits of cold weather survival, and we accidentally discovered that humans do not have limits. They have preferences, and apparently some of them prefer the cold. That is terrifying. Yes. I agreed. Yes, it is. Somewhere in the cafeteria, Jake Thompson was probably ordering a fourth meal and asking someone if they wanted to hear about the time he went ice fishing in Wisconsin. And somewhere in the galaxy, other species were going about their lives, completely unaware that humans had just redefined what survival meant. I made a note to update the trial parameters. If humans were going to keep enrolling in the academy, we needed trials that actually challenged them. Though based on what I had learned about humanity over the past 3 days, I was not sure such trials existed. Humans did not survive extreme environments. They thrived in them, and that made all the difference. The end.